Tonight, just like old times, Russia versus the United States, President Obama versus President Putin. They are pointing fingers at each other, and this time it's over Syria. But also, they've just met with one another at the UN. We're going to take a look at the politics and the strategy of this high-stakes situation. Then, the Pope may be back home in the Vatican, but the U.S. is still buzzing about his historic visit. We're going to talk about the highlights and also whether this will lead to lasting changes in the church. And Speaker Boehner is stepping down. But will that turn the Republican Party upside down and make things even worse when it comes to governing in Washington? Our political panel, they'll weigh in on that. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Now we're going to begin tonight with drama at the United Nations as the United States and Russia squabble over Syria. Barack Obama and Vladimir Putin, they just wrapped up a closed-door meeting with Syria at the top of the agenda. The U.S. was caught by surprise when Russia started working with Iran and Iraq in the fight against ISIS in Syria. Now, that's on the heels of Russia pouring more planes and troops into Syria with the twin goals of battling ISIS and also propping up the controversial Assad regime. Now, President Obama, he told the General Assembly he is none too pleased with what is going on.
Lasting stability can only take hold when the people of Syria forge an agreement to live together peacefully. The United States is prepared to work with any nation, including Russia and Iran, to resolve the conflict. But we must recognize that there cannot be, after so much bloodshed, so much carnage, a return to the pre-war status quo.
But that is where the consensus ends, because Putin outlines his plan to deal with ISIS. What he wants to do is he wants to build a coalition that includes the Assad government.
On the basis of international law, we must join efforts to address the problems that all of us are facing and create a genuinely broad international coalition against terrorism.
Now, a short time ago, I spoke to one of the top foreign policy experts, Michael O'Hanlon of the Brookings Institution, to help us sort this situation out. So, Michael, what's Russia up to here relating to Syria, and did it completely catch the U.S. off guard, the agreement that they made with Syria, Iran, and Iraq?
Yes, I think the United States has been quite surprised by the agreement, especially between Russia and Iraq, because, as you know, we have the long-standing relationship with the Iraqi government. We helped them save their country last year when it was under direct threat by ISIL, and we might have hoped that the Iraqis would not, in a sense, go behind our back. And in this agreement, as I understand it, they're not only sharing intelligence, which you could say is harmless enough, but I think they're probably, in effect, validating Russia's access to their airspace to fly in equipment and weaponry from Russia to Syria to support President Assad. So in one sense, yes, we're surprised and taken by surprise quite a bit. On the other hand, we really shouldn't be overwhelmingly floored by this, because the government in Iraq is Shia-led. President Assad is from a Shia-like ethnic group, the Alawites. And of course, we've known for a long time that Iran has a fair amount of influence in Iraq with the Iraqi government. And of course, it's Iran, along with Russia, that's supporting Assad. And so they are natural allies in one way or another. Iraq's trying to have its cake and eat it too. Work with the U.S., also work with Russia. And maybe that's even possible if we can come up with the right strategy.
Michael, what is Russia's endgame here? Is this they want to have sanctions reduced at the end of the day? They want to change the subject from Ukraine? I mean, this is a marriage of convenience with Assad. What are they really after? Does anyone know?
Well, in the broadest sense, as you point out, I mean, Russia would love to have sanctions lifted, would love to be a counterweight to NATO in Europe, would love to make sure NATO doesn't expand any further ever, and maybe even that it becomes gradually weakened and means less even in its current form. So yes, in the most grandiose sense, Putin has very ambitious goals for global order and European security. But within Syria itself, I'm not sure it's that complicated. Within Syria itself, Putin says, Assad's always been my guy. He's fighting against ISIL. ISIL has links to the same Sunni terrorists who have attacked Russia before. I'm going to support my friends. And the Americans, once again, botched this thing badly because they had a theory that Assad was going to fall because of the revolutionary Arab Spring. And they had a theory that he couldn't stay in power because he only represented a minority of the country and didn't have enough money. And the Americans have been wrong for 4+ years. And so Putin feels no need to give us the benefit of the doubt in supporting or even condoning our strategy.
Is there an element, you think, in the U.S. military that says, you know what, forget what we think about Putin. If at the end of the day, they're going to do everything they can between him and Assad to get rid of ISIS for their own reasonings, why don't we let them do the dirty work for us and then reassess after the fact? Is there any idea of letting Russia fill the void here, because at least they're going to deal with a common enemy?
Well, I don't think Russia is going to defeat ISIL. Russia is going to protect Assad in those parts of the country where his immediate strength, his core constituency is most under duress or threat. And that actually may be in areas where the moderate opposition, such as it is of greatest influence and power. So the Russians may wind up hurting the very people that we're trying to train and equip. So that's one downside. Also, if you seem to turn a blind eye and let the friends of Assad just go out and attack Sunnis, you're basically inciting more anger from the entire Sunni Arab world, and Turkey as well, which means that all these countries that are not really sure if they can trust us are going to be even more skeptical, and they're going to take matters into their own hands and stop worrying as much about whether they're supporting an extremist Sunni group or a moderate Sunni group. They're going to see it as acceptable to support any Sunni group under the circumstances where Assad and Russia are attacking Sunnis.
Finally, Iran and Iraq. On Iran's front, after a controversial deal made its way through Congress, as we know, to, in effect, stop their nuclear program, and in response, we're going to lift sanctions. Is there any second thoughts here from the administration to say, so soon after that, you're going to again work with Russia against our self-interest relating to Assad? Is there any chance this queers that deal?
Well, there were some people, and there are some people in the Obama administration who have really hoped that the nuclear deal with Iran would usher in a period of détente. But the Obama administration hasn't really been consistent in their expectations, and just as often they'll say, no, we have no such illusions. It would be nice if it happened, but it's not really our expectation. And former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, in a big speech earlier this month, was very clear. She expects no improvement in Iran's behavior in the region as a result of the nuclear deal, even though she supports the deal. And so I think the logic that says that because of this nuclear deal we are entering into a period of better relations with Iran, that is a long shot at best, and certainly not something that we should be hinging our Syria strategy on. So no, I'm not surprised.
On the subject of Iraq, it is a tough pill to swallow with the amount of blood and treasure that we've invested in that country, that they turn around and not only work against American policy as it relates to Syria, but also cooperate with, among others, Iranians and the Russians here. There's got to be a growing sentiment, I would think, for them to say, you know what, enough. You're on your own, Iraq. Maybe we'll go help out the Kurds here, but no longer are we going to be giving, in effect, check after check when you don't even work on the same page as us.
Well, I think that that's understandable at one level, and it may come to that. But right now, first of all, it's not obvious that Russia really is fundamentally working at cross purposes with us, because in Syria itself, we have prioritized the defeat of ISIL as concern number one, and we've actually been asking fighters who want our training and equipment, will they sign a piece of paper promising not to fight President Assad? Because we think that is a secondary priority. We feel we have no legal basis to let them do that, and so we require these same people we're training to sign a piece of paper not to go attack Assad. I think it's a ridiculous policy, frankly, but it's what we're doing ourselves. So under these circumstances, for the Iraqi government to be tolerating Russia's support for Assad is not so diametrically opposed to U.S. policy that we can afford to get up in arms about it. Now, down the road, that may evolve. Down the road, that may change. But also, one further point. Don't forget, the Iraqi government has ISIL 50 miles away from their doorstep, 50 miles away from Baghdad. This is an Iraqi government that a year and a quarter ago, or a year and a month ago, was worried that ISIL might actually take over parts of Baghdad. They are fighting for their life, and the Americans haven't yet helped them come up with a strategy that is defeating ISIL.
Michael O'Hanlon, as always, I really appreciate a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you kindly.
And we want to get you involved in the conversation. So head over to Facebook and Twitter and sound off on tonight's question. Is Syria a U.S. problem, a U.S. issue? Or are you willing to just have us basically sit this one out and let Russia fill the void with everything that may entail? All right, coming up next, we will switch gears to certainly the issue that dominated this past week, the papal visit. Well, the pontiff, he's back in the Vatican now, but will his historic trip have the U.S. With lasting changes to not only Vatican doctrine, but so much more?